Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining IEC for our Lunch and Learn series. We will get started in a few minutes. We had a lot of people registered for the 30 by 30 Lunch and Learn, so we want to make sure everyone can get in before we get started. But thank you so much for being here. All right, so we are going to get started. Thank you for joining IEC for our Lunch and Learn series. We hope these sessions will keep our community connected during this very still difficult time, and we have made them publicly available. If this is your first time joining IEC for a Lunch and Learn, we do have every Lunch and Learn recorded on our YouTube page, so feel free to peruse that playlist if you're looking for something to watch. But since our founding in 1975 by a group of dedicated grassroots environmentalists, IEC has led issue advocacy campaigns by allowing environmental organizations to pool their resources and create a higher profile for environmental issues. Today, IEC represents more than 90 environmental and community organizations and nearly 400 individual members from throughout Illinois. If you're not already a member of IEC and are able to give, please consider joining today by using the link in the chat box, which our helpful intern Kimberly is going to put in soon. So great, we are going to get this started, and this will read a little bit like a listening session. So we're going to be collecting data from you. We want to hear from the community as we're undergoing education about what 30 by 30 is, what America the Beautiful is. We also want to hear from the community, as you guys are experts, you guys live in Illinois. We are facing unprecedented times, and something needs to be done about climate action, the biodiversity crisis, and pollution. So please keep in mind that we are going to take information from you and hope that this will be a dialogue. All right. Okay, so do you guys just see the PowerPoint? Awesome. Okay. So welcome to our listening session. IEC is a part of the Illinois 30 by 30 Coalition. We actually convened it, and it's made up of environmental organizations, environmental justice organizations, community groups, faith-based organizations, land trusts, water and land management organizations. So any organization you think could be affiliated with conservation, we have in this coalition, and we're doing a series of listening sessions, and we decided to turn them into our Lunch and Learn because we want to hear from affiliates, individual members, and the public about this. So we're going to talk about conservation on several scales, along with the international 30 by 30 campaign, which is to protect 30% of land and water by 2030. So this is being done on the global level. It is an international campaign with countries in some form or another committing to this ambitious goal, which was proposed by the International Panel on Climate, IPCC. So, you're thinking about it on the global scale, collectively, we need to protect 30% land and water to mitigate the worst of climate change, to prevent biodiversity loss or the extinction crisis that we're in, and to help reduce pollution. But there are other scales you can view this through, such as on the national scale, which is where the America the Beautiful report comes in, which was released by the Biden administration earlier this year. Well, it's also a goal of protecting 30% land and water, but in the US right now, that protection of voluntarily making private lands conservation easements or protected areas, while also assessing how we work with sustainable agricultural practices. How does local food come into this? How do we make sure that our conservation agencies are collaborating together to provide high quality habitats for wildlife? That is what's happening on the national scale. But we're going to hyper focus on Illinois. And Illinois is very unique in the fact that it has rural, urban, and suburban landscape. So what is happening at the national level, which was somewhat laid out in that report, it has to be fine-tuned to Illinois. One, we're trying to make the Midwest a major player in protecting natural area. but we're also assessing how do the different types of populations and landscapes in Illinois, how do we align Illinois with the 30 by 30 campaign? And that's what the coalition is working on, and that's why we're here to talk to you today. Also, please feel free to use the raise your hand function, ask questions in the chat. We have Elliot and Lindsay on who are going to be moderating the chat and can answer questions along the way, and I will try to answer them in this overview. So what is this crisis? So we are in the sixth mass extinction due to loss of habitat, pollution, a lot of anthropogenic causes. So, and a group of scientists from around the world issued the warning, humanity is causing a rapid loss of biodiversity, and with it, Earth's ability to support complex life. So it's not just saving nature for nature's sake, but it's also, there are clear links between nature and biodiversity and the things that we rely on, like food security, clean water, globally. And so along with preventing the loss of biodiversity, we also have to think about that's protecting our food web. That is creating a sustainable environment for generations to come. And while we need to curb greenhouse gas emissions, it's not enough to prevent the collapse of our biodiversity, our natural ecosystems, which are fastly degrading. So more needs to be done. Right now, so 24 million acres of natural land have been lost since 2001, which is an area bigger than Indiana. We are in the midst of this nature crisis. That's like a football field of natural area every 30 seconds. And while you think about what's protected right now, when we're talking about 30% protected by 2030, only 12% of the US land is protected. So we have a long way to go. It's a very ambitious goal to get to 30 by 30. Just on the international scale. And right now, you're going to be appalled when I tell you where we are in the US, in Illinois. So what is 30 by 30? So it's using nature-based climate solutions like creating protected areas, management of wetlands and other ecosystems, protecting biodiversity. It's using those nature-based climate solutions to sequester more carbon, essentially, and create more sustainable high-rich habitats, and also employ sustainable agriculture practices. And when you couple that with things like reducing pollution, actions that mitigate climate change, sustainable agricultural production, you achieve reversing the extinction crisis that we're in and protecting biodiversity, while also achieving mitigating climate change. And so while this is a global and international thing, it's also something we want to do here in Illinois. So again, this is Biden releasing his Restoring Conserving America, the Beautiful report, and this is how we're going to tackle the climate crisis at home and abroad. And there are a myriad of ways you can do this 30 by 30, whether that's working lands or sustainable agriculture, thinking about how you include urban open space, because we cannot leave out cities such as the city of Chicago. They have to be included to make this work. And it's really reimagining what a natural landscape is, whether that's wildlife refuges, state parks, marine protected areas. We're really thinking holistically about the natural ecosystems that are included in 30 by 30, and everything counts in some shape or form. So right now, Illinois is at less than 4% protected land, and 75% of it is agriculture. So those are two big problems. One, we have a really large long way to get to 30 by 30 in terms of how we scale up our natural areas that are protected in Illinois, but 75% of the land is agriculture. So it's not just creating, say, a conservation easement or a nature preserve. You also have to think about how are we using working lands? How are we implementing sustainable agricultural practices, working with our farming community, make sure that they have their economic well-being, but also protecting actual natural areas that are near agricultural lands. So also we have to think about that Illinois only 4% of the food grown in Illinois is eaten here. But we have some of the most fertile soil in the nation. So how are we using the resources and services that Illinois provides to our best advantage in a more sustainable way? Also, we rank very low, 44 in public land ownership. So we do not have a lot of public land, a lot of protected areas. So think about how we ramp up to 30 by 30, the Illinois 30 by 30 coalition. And what we're here today is really to figure out what are the problems, what are the issues, but also what does Illinois' alignment look like with 30 by 30? And so we have a set of goals that we want to undertake, making sure there's safe and inclusive access to the outdoors, making sure that we're creating green jobs and an economic market, implementing sustainable agriculture practices, making sure there's a public process for communities and the developments that happen in their communities. Local food is a very important factor, especially with fighting food apartheid, and clean water, along with clean air as well. So if Elliot or Lindsay, one of you can drop the survey. Oh, I'm so sorry. You guys are asking me to slow down. I apologies for that. If one of you guys can drop the survey, we would love for all of you to start completing the survey as we go along. So we're going to provide background information for a series of goals, and the survey will follow along with that as well. All right. So outdoor access is also a goal adopted by the Illinois 30 by 30 Coalition, but it's also part of the America the Beautiful campaign. And so every Illinois citizen should have access to green space. It shouldn't be hindered by distance or feelings of unsafety. So right now, 50,000 acres of the 1.5 million total acres in Illinois are owned by non-governmental conservation groups or land trusts. This is a beautiful picture of LaBaugh Woods, which I had a meeting at. I love outdoor meetings, but we have some questions about this. So we want to know, 4% of Illinois land area is protected. Do you believe this is enough? I'm considering the types of people that join our lunch and learns. I can't imagine you think this is enough, but this also comes along with other implications of like, okay, if only 4% of Illinois land is protected right now, then what are other areas of places that can be identified to increase our protected area, and how does that affect the way the state of Illinois occurs now? How does that affect your well-being? How does that impact wildlife? But still, we want more land acquisition. And also thinking about how outdoor access is frequently exclusionary to low-income or Black, Indigenous people of color who are also disproportionately exposed to pollution. So, but then there's also a thing of environmental gentrification. So this is a very loaded question, and we hope to discuss it later in our breakout rooms. So what are some barriers that you might have accessing nature? And I want to say there is, we're using access in kind of a dual way. So accessibility in terms of being able to physically get to a natural area, whether mode of transportation or the time commitment you have to get there, but also the type of accommodating infrastructure. Like if you are a person with disability, can you access a nature preserve or a forest preserve? Are you able to move around and about? All right, I'm gonna move on. And then we would also like to know, how do you recreate in nature? Do you consider Illinois a place where you can recreate and enjoy the outside? What do you enjoy doing here? Please check any and all that apply. All right, so there is a jobs piece of this. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, or IDNR, and it supports 90,000 jobs and directly employs 1,200. But there's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done on the existing natural areas, whether that's our parks, our national parks, our forest preserves, just the Chicago Park districts. This figure right here, the 6.5 billion for maintenance, is only for national parks. But imagine that number could be much higher once you start adding in the other groups. And also it's, BIPOC people are slightly underrepresented. So we want to make sure that with 30 by 30, it's creating jobs. And not only is that a goal of the Illinois 30 by 30 Coalition, but it's also a goal of the America the Beautiful campaign. So when you think about green jobs, and we are very open to discuss what green jobs means to you, because it does vary depending on the type of background that the person answering the question has. But what do you think is important when hiring people to work at farms and conservation areas? And feel free to use that other. We definitely want to hear and collect feedback. This data is going to help inform the strategic planning of the Illinois 30 by 30 Coalition. And we do hope to at some point introduce a conservation legislative package or bill to address all of the issues that are coming up. And then what are some barriers that your community might have when applying to these jobs? All right, so we also have a local food piece. This is especially pertinent in, say, like urban areas where you may not have the large scale farming, but you do have community gardens or smaller farms. So 75% of our state is, again, agriculture, 95% of the food is imported. But we think that every Illinois resident should have access to healthy, environmentally sustainable, and ethically sourced food, but also the right to grow their own food. And IEC has done a lot of work with that ability to grow your own food and sell it, like the Home to Market bill, the Cottage Foods bill, and the Right to Garden bills, which you can find more on our website and ask our great state programs director, Elliot, about if you have any questions. And Lindsay too.
Yeah, I might throw in just a little bit of context here. We get this question a lot, like, why is local food going to be part of this 30 by 30 campaign? Why does that seem like something that would be part of this, like, really conservation focused initiative? And that is grounded in the international campaign and in this idea that we need biodiversity, we need high quality habitat, and as we lose habitat and biodiversity, pollinators, plants and animals, our food system is projected to collapse. So here in Illinois, when we have the blackest, most fertile soil that can grow, like 90% of eligible crops like that can be planted can be grown here in our growing zone. It's such a valuable resource, and so we really thought that local food should be included here under this umbrella of maintaining our small towns, our food ecosystems, and conservation as a whole, that it sort of all fits under the umbrella. Thanks, Tanisha. I know that's one that people are always like, this doesn't seem like it fits, and I just wanted to make that pitch.
No, that's really important background information. Thank you so much for sharing. And like I said, we are saving space for breakout rooms, so we are going to be able to discuss every question and everything that comes up here. Big one, sustainable agriculture. Illinois is 75% ag land, so you have to incorporate working lands into this initiative. Ellie, I saw you put your video on. Do you want to add some background to that?
Yeah, I'll just briefly say, I mean, as we've highlighted in here before, 70% or over 70% of the land in Illinois is actually in agricultural production right now. The idea of getting like 30% of the land in Illinois into like a natural state is a pretty difficult prospect to wrap our heads around. In fact, I mean, in a lot of ways, it would be pretty hard to even get there, which is why we want sustainable ag to be a big part of this. I mean, it's obviously our biggest economic driver in the state, is corn and soy production, but we do want people to start thinking outside the box in terms of how these two specific types of plants are farmed, but also thinking about diversifying what's being grown in Illinois and thinking about that. Agriculture definitely has a big part to play in the fight against climate change, not just from emissions from the vehicles that are on the farms, but there's a role for agriculture to help with things like carbon capture and improve water quality, not just here in Illinois for our residents, but all the way, going down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. So this is going to play a very, very big part in it. I'll just say that. But yeah, we're excited to talk to you more about that.
And so we have a few questions with that in mind about sustainable agriculture. Do you make choices to seek out food that is grown in ways to prevent pollution? And how much more would you pay to purchase food that you know is grown in a way that protects soil and water and prevents pollution? Also, how easy is it for you to find local food? Is it difficult? Is it fairly easy? Is it somewhere in between? We would love to know that. Whoops. And then in terms of, and please use the mode of transportation you use most frequently to, go grocery shopping. How close is your access to fresh produce? Whether if you're driving, is it 10 minutes, 10 to 30, or if you're walking there, public transportation, we would really like to know. And then there's the public process. So we want to make sure that instead of the way that conservation has traditionally been done, where experts say we're going to implement this plan and there's no engagement with the community, but not just conservation, like development, there's a serious problem in the lack of what the community wants and what development happens in their communities. So with 30 by 30, we want to change that. Communities are vital to this work, and you can't leave out the people piece. So in terms of the public process, we want to make it where communities can participate in what's going on and can lead on environmental and public health initiatives because they know what's best going on. And it's important to have that community buy-in and that community knowledge because it's likely that a chance could fail. We see some instances of that right here in Chicago with the General Irons campaign and the metal shredding facility moving from Lincoln Park to the southeast side. We don't want things like that happening, and the community was very successful in getting that permit delayed. So and also that's another source of pollution in already overburdened communities. So with that in mind, are you involved in the processes of land use decisions in your community? Do you even have opportunities to engage in land use decisions in your community? Please let us know. We want to hear. And clean water. So our water, as Elliot was explaining, sustainable agriculture can play a significant role in the quality of our water. But Illinois has so many water resources here, whether that's our streams, our rivers, our Lake Michigan, which I live a few minutes away from. So we want to make sure that our communities are resilient to flood impacts. There's been a lot of flooding happening, say on the east side of Chicago and communities like Peoria. It's becoming a very significant problem as the consequence of climate change worsens. We have a lot of aquatic ecosystems that we need to manage and protect, but also it's a social perspective as well. People want to know that they have access to clean, reliable water, which is not happening across the state of Illinois. So one, we want to know how often is your life impacted by flooding? And our second question to you is, do you trust the water that comes from your tap? And again, all of these questions are going to be discussed in our breakout rooms, which are going to happen now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Hope I didn't lose any of you. And we are now going to go into breakout rooms. And in these breakout rooms, we're going to discuss responses to the survey questions, but also anything you learned about 30 by 30. Again, the goal of this is to inform the next steps that the coalition takes and how we go about approaching solutions to these conservation issues that we just raised. So please feel free to provide any feedback, raise any flags, talk about any of your attitudes, your barriers, or any potential solutions you might see that will work in your community. We have Lindsay, Elliot, myself, and Kimberly on deck to facilitate, and we're going to open up breakout rooms right now. So please hit the join button so you can join a breakout room. And we look forward to having these discussions with you. Are there any questions while people are moving over? All right. Room 2. Lindsay's in there. Kimberly's going to be in there.
So I think we're all back from breakout rooms. Is Tanisha, are you here?
Well, she said she was having internet problems.
Oh, goodness.
That's the way it goes. Well, I think we're all back. I can try to hopefully end this in the way that Tonisha was envisioning it, but we're going to give it a shot. So thank you all for participating in the breakout rooms. I know in mine we had some pretty good discussion, and I think we kind of just wanted to open it up to folks to kind of maybe give their overall thoughts on this 30 by 30 thing, and kind of what you discussed in your rooms, like what was a big, takeaway or something like that, or a big point of big topic of discussion when you were in your rooms. Is anybody willing to volunteer themselves to say something really quick? Feel free to go, off mute and all that kind of fun stuff.
So I'll talk about what we've kind of talked about in our group. We just kind of discussed where IEC could fit into helping organizations that are interested in 30 by 30. We also kind of discussed what these organizations were working on and how, they're trying to kind of contribute to the conservation movement, as well as sustainable agriculture and farming.
Yeah, that's great. And just as a shout out too, that's a great reminder that any group or anybody in here that wants to, be more like, hands-on involved with this process, definitely let somebody on our staff know, and we will get you plugged in. We've got a listserv set up, and we do monthly meetings to talk through our strategy development around 30 by 30. And we're still kind of in the, early formation phase, but we're really gaining some momentum in terms of the amount of groups that we've got on and all that kind of good stuff. Yep, and Tonisha, yeah, she said we'll share recording and survey links after this. Tonisha, are you back with us right now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so sorry about that. My Zoom has been acting up today. So has everyone done a debrief except for my group, perhaps?
I think we just, Kim had talked briefly from her group. I know in mine, one of the big questions we're asking, right, is like, we've got this 30% kind of goal that comes from like the international and national perspective, but doing 30% of natural land in Illinois is borderline impossible. That means taking, a lot of cropland out, which is just not something that we foresee happening, just considering that ag is such a big part of our state's economy. But one of the things that we did want to consider is, what is actually counting towards 30%. And there's lots of different ways to measure it. From the ag perspective, just because that's what I work on a lot, you could do, acres of cover crops, whether you're meeting goals under the nutrient loss reduction strategy. On the local food side, decreasing the distance between where food is harvested and where it's actually consumed at, and expanding more, local food, local food opportunities. And Matt, Matt, to your point about taking land out, one of the things that we did talk about in our group is identifying lands in Illinois that are prone to things like flooding and extreme weather events right now, and getting those out of production. I think a big thing, just last week, U.S. Department of Ag declared a massive disaster declaration for multiple counties in Illinois based off of really horrible flooding that had happened this last year. And basically, one of the things that it's going to highlight is the fact that there's going to be some land that should not be farmed anymore. And maybe it was farmable in the past, but with the proliferance of extreme weather events and climate change, I think there needs to be a recognition that some of this stuff just needs to be put back into wetlands and more natural states that can help actually prevent damage to other fields in Illinois and improve things like community resilience to climate change. And then, Jody, and transitioning out of monocrops is absolutely key. When we talk about biodiversity, we talk about that from a natural perspective in terms of different species out there in the natural world. But also, at least in my mind, I view diversity is also being in what we're actually growing for food in Illinois. Corn and soy dominates the landscape. One fun thing that we like to point out that people have realized is that all the corn that you see, driving up and down like I-55 or wherever you're at in the state, pretty much none of that is consumed by human beings. That is all going to animal feed and high fructose corn syrup and plastics kind of production and a lot of other things. And it's not really directly benefiting any of us as a state, whether we're eating it or anything like that. So yeah, let's use the resources we've got to grow food for us.
Yeah, my group also spent a lot of time on sustainable ag. I'm sorry, who's trying to get in?
Going back a little bit on what Elliot was saying on adding to the croplands and the floodplains and just what can count for 30-30 is just getting all of the soil and water conservation districts to recognize that things like grassed waterways are a major appropriate conservation practice, and that some folks even plant native plants to grassed waterways. And if that's done, then it seems quite reasonable to me to include those sorts of lands, and fairly obviously those would connect with buffers that could also be planted to native perennial plants with deep roots to hold the soil in place.
Yeah, that's a great flag. I mean, one thing that I've continued to kind of advocate for is like Minnesota, for example, has a buffer law where any agricultural land that goes up against any river, lake, stream, anything like that has to have a buffer on it. And they've actually successfully gotten something like 98% of the land that would fall into that category into that program. And it's been immensely successful for that state. And you're right. I think that those acres of lands that are transitioned could count towards the 30%, especially if the buffers that they're installing can double as habitat for native species as well and help improve habitat diversity overall. Sorry, Tanisha, I'll give it back to you.
No, it's great to see people having the discussion. My group spent a lot of time with sustainable ag, but we even got into like, what do you define as green jobs, such as someone said it's any jobs that are involved in the effort to decarbonize our operations and systems. And I think that was a very interesting way. And we also even got into talking about how that includes clean renewable energy, which I didn't mention at the top, but like that's also something that the Illinois 30 by 30 Coalition is looking into, is like, nature-based climate solutions coupled with clean renewable energy transitions is kind of how we achieve all of this. So we are coming up at the hour. Thank you for joining IEC for our Lunch and Learn series. We hope these sessions will help to continue our community, keep our community connected, and recordings of each session can be found on our YouTube page. There will be a follow-up email going out to everyone that registered with the recording link and the survey link. Please, please, please fill that out, and also keep checking your email because there might be a listening session coming to your community. I've already pasted our contact information in the chat, but the person to contact if you have any questions or follow-ups or even want to get involved, if your organization wants to join the Illinois 30 by 30 Coalition, will be in that follow-up email. And I hope you guys enjoyed spending time with IEC on your lunch hour. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.